Sometimes in life we have a moment that something happens and we remember it for years and we think about it for years. Uh, that happened to me. I was in an ashram in India. It's a very ancient story, but in my life, it starts around 1978 on the other side of the world. Early in the morning, reading the Guru Gita, chanting to the Guru. And as you chant it, on the left side are the Sanskrit words, but Latin alphabet, and on the right-hand side is the translation. So as I'm reading it, I glance back and forth at various things to try and understand what it is I'm chanting. And I come to the word Abrahman, and I look over to the right side to see what it means. And I know the Brahmins are the priests, and I'm wondering what Abrahman means. And then I see it's Abraham. And it says, first priest. First priest? That's Abraham. That's the first priest of the Jews, right? And the Muslims and the Christians. So then I get very curious about it. Could this be the same person? Brahma, and Abraham? So I think about it for years. And the last couple of years, I started studying Judaism again. And I'm talking to a friend of mine who's a Sufi, and I start to tell her this story because every now and again, I tell people because I just think it's an amazing coincidence. I mean, how could these names be like really exactly the same name, first priest? So she says, why don't we ask Sam about it? And I've been studying with Sam for a couple of years. He's been my Jewish teacher. And he said, yes. He says, after Sarah died, that is Abraham's wife, Sarah, he had many concubines, and he sends the children of these concubines off to the east with gifts. With gifts. And then later on in the Torah, it says that King Solomon was so wise that it was even wiser than the children of the East. So it refers to these children again. Well, after Sam says this to me, I get really excited. I got to go home and find out. I got to go to Google. I mean, 45 years ago, when I first heard this story in like around 1978, there was no Google to look it up. But now I can look it up. And sure enough, I find that Abraham was married to Sarah, and Brahma was married to Saraswati. Abraham and Sarah had Isaac when Abraham was 100 and Sarah was 90. Brahma and Saraswati had their son when Brahma was 100 and Saraswati was 90. Abraham takes Isaac up to the mountain to sacrifice him, but then in the last minute substitutes a ram instead. Brahma's son, Dasha, is killed, but then Brahma gets a ram's head and places it on his head. He reincarnates him and places a ram's head on his head instead. What other things are similar in these two stories? Well, Brahma and Saraswati are brother and sister. What about Abraham and Sarah? Well, it turns out that at one point in the Torah, Abraham tells King Abimelech that in fact he and Sarah are brother and sister. They have the same father, different mothers. What else is similar? Well, both Sarah and Saraswati are supposed to be so beautiful. Saraswati is so beautiful that Brahma makes 4 heads so he can view Saraswati from every direction. Sarah is so beautiful that Abraham tells Sarah, listen, whenever we go past a king or the pharaoh, you have to say that you're my sister. Otherwise, they'll kill me, to take her as a wife. Well, what about the Vedas? What about this time period? It turns out that the Vedas were written by Brahma, supposedly, around, I mean, the time difference, but between 1800, 1500 BC. And that's around the same time that they figured that Abraham was. Brahma is the creator god of India. There is only one God, and that's Brahma. Later on, in years follows, many, many gods, of course, show up in the Hindu world. But in the very beginning, it was just Brahma. There is to be no image of Brahma, it is said. And of course, there is to be no image of the God of Abraham. The children of Abraham are supposed to be priests. The children of Brahma are a community of priests. Of Brahma, there is to be no image of him. Of that God, you can make no images. God is formless and bodiless. There are to be no statues of Brahma, only sacrifices. And the same thing with the God of Abraham. Why am I so excited by this? Well, it means that all of these spiritual traditions are connected. I mean, we know that Abraham is also the father of Christianity and Islam's, but now it looks like it can also be connected to the Hindus. And then through the Hindus, of course, Buddhism comes out of the Hindu tradition, so it's connected to Buddhism too. So here we have a wonderful link to all parts of the world. And it turns out that I was not the only one that put these two things together. It turns out that Voltaire thought Abraham and Brahma were the same person. And in fact, it goes back to the Greeks who thought they were the same person. And the Jewish historian Josephus in the 1st century writes that the Jews were from India and they traveled to Goshen in Egypt and settled there. So there are many, many ancient historical connections that are made. Anyway, I have a theory about how that could have happened, and I'll tell you that in the next video.